Hello again. To those who saw me before, welcome back. To everyone else, welcome. And to those on the live stream, welcome as well. I won't bother with too many introductions because I'm excited just to jump right into our key interview here. As Gabriel mentioned, we have EDF CEO Luc Rémont with us. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
Really appreciate it. As has been the theme of the day and this week, we are looking at the new commission, the incoming commissioners, and the policies that they're going to have. Now that we've seen the commissioner hearings, we know what the mission letters say. We've seen what Teresa Ribera had to say. I'm curious to get your impression. We were hearing concerns from the nuclear industry, from nuclear advocates, about what you could call the pretty minimal or perhaps tepid encouragement for nuclear from the hearings. Was that your perception from the hearings, from the mission letters? And with Teresa Ribera specifically, any concerns about having her overseeing some elements of nuclear policy in this next mandate?
Look, before looking at nuclear, I think the most important thing for Europe today is to make sure that we have a consistent view and a consensus on the fact that we need to continue the journey of decarbonation, notably thanks to low-carbon electrification. That's really the motto where we need to continue to build on the consensus of Europe, on the fact that we are collectively super serious about the journey to net zero, and that we can rely on a cleaner and cleaner electricity to get there. Mm-hmm. Once we have this consensus, nuclear is just one technology among others that is needed to build an electrical system that delivers that promise. Mm-hmm. Why is it necessary? Just because an electrical system needs to work 24/7 and deliver the energy that is expected by the demand side, by the consumers, the people we are working for. Mm-hmm. They are not in ideology. They are mostly in, I want power when I need power. So to build an electrical system that is resilient on this, we need a set of power sources that can supply power when there is wind, when there is sun, and when there is none. And this combination needs to deliver power for European citizens. So the big question for the new commission coming, and to come back to your question on the hearings, is whether we can feel that the new members of the commission are going to endorse the declaration of the president of the commission, saying that nuclear is among the elements that constitutes the solution. And I did not detect a contradiction to this, which is very important. You may know that 18 member states have committed to a new nuclear program. Yep. 18 member states is a lot. And even though every member state has to define its own mix of energy, 18 member states makes a very big difference for Europe. So making sure that the Commission continues in this direction is very important, also for the resilience of the unified electrical system that we are building together at the European level.
Do you think you need to see specific changes in EU policy, however? I'm thinking, for instance, of state aid. They seem very clear in the hearings that they were not going to have state aid, for instance, for conventional nuclear reactors. Now, I know the Nuclear Member State Alliance, the 11 countries, has set a goal of 150 gigawatts. Can you reach that goal without tweaking state aid, for instance, to give more
the market
incentives?
rules are, I'm sorry to disagree with your statement. No. The market rules are super clear, and they have been agreed in 23. They are good. We have good market rules in Europe. These market rules are saying that we are going to shift our market more to the long term to facilitate investment on the consumer side and on the investment side for the supply and the grid. That's one. The second one is that our approach of state aid for investment is technology agnostic. Full stop. That's the only thing that we are expecting. We should get from all the member states and the Commission the agnosticity of the judgment, whether we talk about what you call conventional nuclear, renewables, or whatever else, provided that this is providing an electricity that is low carbon. That's the only thing that should be expected. And this is how the rules are. They are like this. We don't need to change the rules. We need just to apply the rules.
That's a good pivot to the Clean Industrial Deal, which we expect on February 26th. What specifically are you looking for from the Clean Industrial Deal? We expect, for instance, that small modular reactors will be somehow included. What elements, very concretely, would you like to see in this legislation?
Look, I think we are at a really defining moment of our transition towards clean energy usage. Europe has been putting forward a lot of effort since 20 years to decarbonize the supply side. Journey needs to be continued, of course, but at this stage, our electricity demand is not growing, which means that the main challenge that we are going to be facing during this decade, before anything new comes on the supply side, maybe next decade, during this decade, the main challenge we are all facing is that we are talking a lot about transitioning our usages to reduce the fossil fuel dependency. The reality is that our energy consumption stays the same. So the main challenge that we have as a community is really to deliver shortly, in the very next coming years, a shift of all usages of energy towards non-fossil fuel driven usages. That starts by electricity, of course, but that's not limited to electricity. So we should move from non-electrical car to electrical car. We should move to buildings that are heated by gas to buildings that are heated by electricity, or something else. We should move some of the heating processes to biomass, and so on and so forth. This is all the elements of these shifts that are going to contribute to the difference between just building a supply that enables transition, which we have been doing consistently over the last 20 years, and actually achieving transition. If we don't make this move in the next few years, after a while, we are just going to look at the fact that we have spent a lot of money on building the supply, and that this money cannot be sustained anymore. So where we need to make a difference in the very next coming years with the Clean Deal is shifting on the user side. And shifting on the user side, in most of the cases, the user has a good business case to do the shift. Once the shift has been done, it's less expensive to remain on a low carbon usage of energy. But you need to invest at the beginning. So there is a moment where you need to put money on the table to be able to make the shift on the user side. And this is where the union needs to focus so that the barrier for the decision is lower and lower. There are plenty of different barriers, regulatory barriers, investment barriers, and sometimes instability barriers. Instability means, if you are a user, you don't want to change if you don't know what are the rules on the next side. You want to get clarity on how you're going to operate on the next side. So giving as much visibility and stability on how things are going to operate are going to trigger more investments. For me, the key elements of this Clean Deal should primarily focus these user-side barriers alleviation.
Given that, do you think that there needs to be a rethinking or a recalculation of what types of energy is being prioritized? So for instance, solar obviously gets a lot of priority with government incentives. Have there been too many incentives for solar and not enough for other types of energy?
Well, it's like for everyone, it depends on where you want to spend your money.
Fair. Where do you think we should be spending it?
Well, as a taxpayer, I would like the money to be spent in the most efficient way to build a resilient and 24/7 available electrical system that supplies this transition. Solar is a very good energy, but by definition, it works when the sun is there. And it's not going to change. And second element, in Europe, roughly speaking, the sun works all at the same time. It's not going to change. These two elements are determining the fact that we are more and more power available at sun time. We reached the point where we have multiplied by 4 this year the number of hours where price of electricity at sun time is 0, if not negative, which means that we struggle to get out of the grid the electricity that is generated at that time. It means that maybe we have too much electricity at that time, or we are close to reach the point where we have too much electricity at that time. So as long as we don't have storage capacities that can stretch a little bit this time, and not very soon be able to stretch a lot this time, maybe this is not the best place where to put taxpayers' money to continue to develop more. Maybe. Might be different from one country to another, but there are more and more countries outside of Europe that are facing this time where if you put more solar, basically you just destabilize your grid without adding more real supply capacity. That's just a question of time. If in the meantime you multiply by 2 your consumption, then more solar is welcome. That's a permanent question of balance between supply and demand, taking the fact that not everything works at the same hours, and demand doesn't work at the same hours. So in Europe, typically, you would have in autumn, now, you would have some sun working till 6 p.m. At 6 p.m., the sun drops.
Yeah.
Guess what?
Earlier here.
Guess what? Everyone in Europe wants to put the light up at the same time.
Right.
How do you manage that? And then you need to light up, if possible without carbon, all the production capacities that can supply when all the demand is. And that's why we are now increasing our instability in our collective system. Of course, as EDF, we see this instability because we have all types of production. And we have to manage this instability more and more. So we see this instability growing. So that's why we are entering the phase where we need to balance the different types of production by first taking into account what is needed at what time by the consumers. And that's what should drive where we put more money on the supply side.
I want to talk a bit about the nuclear expansion strategy and building a European nuclear industry. I know that you have, in the Czech Republic, the recent bid that went to a Korean firm. I know you've sent a complaint to the European Commission under the Foreign Subsidies Regulation regarding that. I wanted to get a sense from you, well, first, if there's any update about that complaint, do you think the Commission is capable of handling the volume of complaints? I know there's been some staffing concerns that we've heard about. And then secondarily, given that, I know the sense is that perhaps part of the reason the bid went to the Korean company was that they might be having government support that isn't allowed or doesn't happen within the EU. Given that, do you think there needs to be more government support so we can have these type of contracts going to European companies, excuse me?
Look, I like competition, but I like competition with everyone competing on the same rules.
Of course.
So the reason we have introduced this complaint is that we believe that our competitor doesn't rely on the same rules as the one that we are playing with. We are under the competition law of Europe. State aid are forbidden. We believe that our competitor could not make the bid it has made without a state aid. So that's why we introduced this complaint. We also believe that this decision is strategic for Europe because the nuclear industry is among the very few industries where we have in Europe a self-sustainable capacity to build from A to Z something that generates power with low carbon. All the other industries, solar, we mentioned solar, we are not self-reliant, not at all. Wind, we are more and more challenged. So nuclear industry, we have an industry in Europe. We are self-reliant. So making sure that we have, when there is an opportunity to build new capacities in Europe, the power to make the rules respected is very important. That's why we introduced this complaint, and we hope the Commission to have all the diligences necessary to make the law respected.
And no sense of timing on when that will be?
It's not in my hands. We have
Fair enough.
introduced the request.
Had to ask. I wanted to, we always have to address the news of the day. We have a no confidence vote going on with Michel Barnier today. I wanted to get a sense from you of what difficulties, if any, that introduces for your company, having a French government that has been stagnant, that has churned through some leadership. What difficulties is that introducing for you?
Look, I could tell you that it's not in my hands, which is literally the truth, clearly. Look, we will adapt ourselves as any company to the environment headwinds that we may be facing. Beyond the moment that the government is going through, I think, I hope at least that we will go through these moments by creating some elements, notably on the energy sector, because I'm working on the energy sector, where at least a consensus in the country, as well as in Europe, where we have debates from time to time, can drive action. Companies, we need things that are not complex and stable enough to drive action. That's how we operate most of the time. So that's what I'm hoping.
Okay. Do you think we're going to see that anytime soon?
Yeah, I'm confident we will. Sure.
All right, fantastic.
That's the other principle. You don't run a company if you are not a little bit optimistic.
Fair enough. Well, on that note, feels like a good place to end. We're also running out of time. So, Luc Rémont, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you all.